Military Redditors, when you were in boot camp, what was the funniest thing you ever heard one of your drill sergeants say? We were marching back from our mock PT test and the tornado sirens began to go off. Navy boot camp is in Illinois, and we looked to our right and there's a tornado forming a couple football fields away in the middle of base. Our RDC, who was already irritated by our failure to line up in time, starts yelling, "Run, suckers, run," and two whole divisions of about 180 people break formation and begin to run to our barracks for our lives. At the time it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, but in hindsight it was actually pretty funny because the RDC caught a lot of crap from other RDCs for doing that. He would explain to us, "What the frick was I supposed to do? Keep you crap heads in rank? Am I supposed to tell you? Oh no, stay in formation. Keep marching, frick no. I'm not trying to die in this shithole. I'm not trying to die in this shithole," as said by many people in Illinois. A recruit interrupted the chief to say, "Chief, there's a bunny rabbit behind you." Chief looked like his brain had actually shorted out, then responded, "Is it armed?" There was a rabbit behind the chief. Chief went off on how the recruit must be from New York City because he'd never seen a rabbit before. Then he sarcastically complimented the recruit on his eagle-eyed awareness of the Al-Qaeda killer attack rabbit. Big nasty teeth. Ah, yes, the pine cone incident. So, I was at basic in Fort Benning, and we were zeroing our weapons as a company. Zeroing a weapon is when you ensure it shoots where you want it to by shooting a paper target repeatedly. Sounds easy enough. Now, I am a terrible shot. I know this. Everyone knows this. However, I get even worse when I'm being screamed at. I spent hours on the line until, finally, there were only 4 of us cats who hadn't gotten a go in the whole company. We had 3 more hours of range time, and if we failed to zero, we'd be recycled. Recycled entails having to revert to another company earlier along in basic training. So, not only do you lose your buddies, but you catch a couple extra weeks of training with a unit that knows your shit but of some sort. So, a fate worse than death. After another unsuccessful grouping, my drill sergeant, without a word, picked me up from the prone position and stood me up. He looked at me and said, "Go find me a pine cone." Confused, I took 4 steps, scooped up a pine cone and took it back to him. I presented him my findings, and he responded, "Private, that's not my pine cone. Go find me my fricking pine cone." Keep in mind, this is a forest in Georgia. There's a metric crap ton of pine cones. So I jog off and work on my mission. This entire time, my DS is shooting all my rounds off, genuinely enjoying himself. Every pine cone I bring to him is not his pine cone. This continued for about 15 minutes while the rest of the company, sitting in a clearing eating MREs, cheered me on. Finally, I breathlessly run up and hand him another pine cone, about to jog off to grab another. He looks at me, then the pine cone, then me. "Steve," he yells, "you found Steve, Private." I crap you not. I had never been more relieved in my entire life, until his face scrunched into a grimace. "Wait, Private, where's his family?" WHO the frick takes a pine cone away from his family? So, terrified, I spend around half an hour scavenging for appropriate sized pine cones, while he fires maniacally. Eventually, I hunt down his wife and his 2 kids. At one point I brought Steve's estranged son, Dennis, and I needed to do push-ups for causing Steve emotional duress. Anyway, he lets me fire. After I prop up the family to cheer me on, I go prone, and I zero on the first iteration. He picks me up again, cracks the only smile I ever saw from him, and says, "It was all in your head, you dumb frick. Good job. Now go do push-ups till I'm tired." He also had me write my congressman later that day to apologize for wasting taxpayer money on bullets. Fort Benning, never again. TL. DR. A pine cone saved my military career, and frick Dennis. Wasting taxpayer money on bullets. Fricking beautiful. The DIs did this thing where they would yell, "Freeze, recruit, freeze." We would have to stop whatever we were doing. As my bunkmate was running back from the showers wearing nothing but a towel, the DI screamed, "Freeze, recruit, freeze." My bunkmate tried to freeze on one leg and then fell down, naked, and because he was following orders, just laid there naked. I laughed and my DI called me a dong gazer. Y'all a bunch of Mufasa looking M. We had a lot of guys that grew facial hair very quickly. Walking by the snake pit when I'm stopped by another MTI who asked if my TI cursed at us. I answered no, as they technically aren't supposed to, but they still do. The MTI then grabbed a banana off my plate and said if I wanted it back I had to answer truthfully. Food being a luxury and I do love my bananas. I answered yes and he sent me on my way. Later that day in the day room my MTI comes busting in. Which one of you sold me out for a goddamn banana? If you had to take a crap my MTI would ask if you're pushing cotton to asses how badly you had to go. Basic is at first terrifying, but as you go through and start to relax you hear some of the funniest things in basic. The banana is the funniest thing I've read on here. We were lined up in 4 rows, or elements. One day a lone soul lined up in his own element. The instructor came running around the corner staring at this guy. He got right up to his face and screamed, "Are you Bruce Willis?" "No," so he whimpered. "Then why are you in the 5th element?" I had to use everything within me to not laugh. If I didn't know better I would think that was set up specifically to make that joke. A guy had his own nickname tattooed on his forearm. The DI said, "Is that so your boyfriend knows who's giving the react around?" "Well, you kept yelling out the wrong name, sir." Smells like Vaseline and broken dreams. Boys, if you don't stop swinging your arms, I'll freaking rip them off and beat you with them. My personal favorite. Unfuck yourself. Unfrick yourself. 6 years out of the army and I still occasionally find myself using this one. My battle buddy and I were ordered to dig holes, so when we're about to the waist he proceeded to turn on a hose. He started to fill the holes with water and told us to stay in the hole. Another DS walks by and asks him what he's doing. He says, "I'm watering my petunias." We had this awesome staff sergeant in 8 who brought a sledgehammer he named Mjolnir everywhere with him. If he caught you freaking up, he would hand you the hammer and tell you to go dig a hole with it. I left MEPS with a guy from my hometown that I had went to high school with, and we got assigned to the same flight. He heard me call him by his first name, and gave this whole speech about how if you're so comfortable with each other, why don't you hold each other's hands? We stood there and stared at him blankly for a minute. Then he seriously made us hold hands for the rest of the freaking day. I had 2 guys in my basic flight, AF, who were friends before the service. They mailed each other letters while they were in basic. Like 6 bunks down from one another. Our MTI figured it out at mail call one day and just stared at them with a blank expression for about 30 seconds. When I was in basic, the 3 drill sergeants for my platoon were all black, and we had a few racial incidents. The biggest offender was a shitbag, overweight, underachieving guy. We'll call him Pierce. Upon receiving punishment for one of his many fuck-ups, Pierce let loose some racial slurs, and that was the last line. While Pierce and his unlucky battle buddy were getting the dog crap smoked out of them in front of the whole platoon, the drill sergeants were spitballing some ideas to resolve his behavior. Their solution was glorious. At the time in Army Basic, probably still today, every soldier had an assigned battle buddy, someone to share accountability and responsibility with. My company took this very seriously. We happened to have 2 very driven, very athletic, very tall and large black soldiers in the platoon as well. The platoon also happened to have an odd number of soldiers. There was a change in buddy assignments, and from that day until graduation, everywhere Pierce went, he was to be in Oreo formation, with each of upstanding black soldiers on either side of him, sharing accountability for his actions. They were colloquially referred to as the Oreo by even the leadership after a while. By graduation, Pierce had mostly turned around and was made into a person more worthy of wearing the uniform. TLDR, racism punished with an Oreo. That's beautiful. I was in USAF basic training from November 2002 until the end of December. One of the TIs in a different flight in my squadron would do this thing where he'd want his flight to do war cries. We'd all be out in formations and this flight was all just screaming bloody murder for no reason. At one point, a few weeks in this happened. I was an element leader, at the front of my formation, and as they were yelling my TI and I locked eyes and smirked at each other. My TI shouted, "Trainee Robiwa, come here." I walked over and stood before him at attention. He leaned into me and whispered, "I will ask you loudly to give me a war cry. I want the Wimp East." Jurleast shout you can muster. I smiled and nodded. Trainee Robiwa, let me hear your war cry. You I shouted, letting my voice crack and waver. He nodded and smiled and I returned to my formation. The war cries stopped the rest of the time I was in basic. Last day of basic. Remember when I flipped all your beds and tore your lockers apart cause I found a nail clipper on the floor? Those were mine. This was my husband's story from Family Day, 1/2-way between basic and 8-4 scouts, back while we were dating. Family Day was a weekend pass, the only break to see families that a scout got during the 4 months of combined basic and 8 training. I came in to see him by myself. Most of the other trainees had either just their parents or parents plus the girlfriend. Here's his story from after I left and he went back to the barracks. Husband. Standing in formation DS Morgan asked who got some over Family Day. A bunch of hands went up. Not mine though. And he yelled back. Balls. He said something about not a single one of you got any. And then pointed at me. He's the only one who got any. Look at that stupid grin on his face. The rest of you should be lining up to suck his dong so you can remember what pee tastes like. This was hilarious. You never see drill instructors eat. Or sleep. For that matter, they were godlike humans who had supreme authority over us. Anyways, at the end of USMC boot camp, you have the Crucible, a series of team building exercises, hikes and good old-fashioned bonding. After it's over and you are officially a Marine, you have the warrior breakfast. I sat down with my plate of food and gorged. I then look up to see the craziest drill instructor in my platoon, with his wild-eyed death stare sit down in a hurry, look at his food, look at me and say, first freaking meal in the 3 months. On a daily basis, drill instructors said some of the funniest crap I will never hear again. Boot camp was the most fun I never want to have again. That's the best way I could explain it to a civilian. Boot camp was the most fun I never want to have again. That's the best way I could explain it to a civilian. That's the best way I've ever heard basic training explained. Does it look like I have a crap sweep hanging between my legs? In response to a basic trainee referring to her as a sir. In OCS we had to man a firewatch post at the front of the squad bay where a candidate would stand behind 2 stacked footlockers and greet sergeant instructors coming on deck with a short spiel. Good morning, evening, rank name, ex-candidates accounted for, all is well. One night about 2 weeks in, there were a lot of sergeant instructors walking past to go into the hut. The candidate that happened to have that shift kept freaking it up, just couldn't get it right. We heard the hut erupt in laughter and a few seconds later an SI steps out and tells the candidate not to worry about getting the spiel right. He's got an easier one for him to remember. He says he'll be using this line a lot more in his career anyway. The new spiel was, good evening, rank name, welcome to McDonald's, can I take your order? He had to use it for the rest of the cycle. We were all on the line on Paris Island and we had to take out our ink sticks, pens. One recruit in the entire platoon didn't move. When the drill instructor asked why he didn't move, the recruit said his ink stick was in his footlocker. The drill instructor made the recruit walk over to his footlocker, bring it back to the line, and shake that bee until an ink stick falls out. The footlocker was closed and he was just standing there shaking it for about 8 minutes or so while the DI just kept yelling, faster. I want a dang ink stick. The recruit directly across the line from the kid shaking the footlocker takes out an extra ink stick, waits for the DI to turn his head, and slid that thing across it, 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 that thing. The DI didn't notice. The next 15 seconds went along the lines of, faster, faster, damn it, faster, FA well I'll be damned. As soon as he saw the ink stick, he walked away. Teamwork M. If I wanted to hear crap, I would have farted. During roll call, there was a soldier whose last name was Parts, so DS would read out loud, Private Parts, Private Parts, where is Private Parts? Whenever a number of soldiers got sick, one of the DS would say, it's cause y'all keep kissing each other, cut that freaking crap out. DS Salcalis, how do you spell my name? Private, DICK Drill Sergeant. Marines. DI talking to Asian recruit. I ever tell you about my grandfather? Recruit. He fought in Vietnam. I don't know who I hate more, you Or my grandfather for not killing your grandfather. Holy crap. We were in trouble. Multiple instructors in our male dorm. Our instructor, a female, was talking to me about how we fricked up. I'm locked at attention. Yes, marming for my life. 2 instructors leave our dorm, male and female. Our door guard yells, "Lady leaving the dorm." That's the right thing to say when all females have exited the dorm. Our instructor stops mid-sentence and yells over my shoulder at the door guard, "I guess I'm wearing my dong today." The female MTIs always had the funniest comebacks for when they are either called sir or when a mistake is made when they leave a room. We had a drill sergeant candidate shadowing a few of the DSs. Our first sergeant instructed him to yell at the CQ desk until he came back. There were trainees at the desk, but he was not to engage them. He was to yell at the desk itself, and it lasted an hour. It was freaking glorious. The crescendo of his tirade of insults was when he started negatively commenting on the type of wood the desk was made out of. "I bet you're not even oak. You're probably just pine. Stupid, worthless pine." He then inspected the desk more closely. "Freaking plywood? This mother brings plywood into my training area." He was insulting the lineage of a freaking desk. All of us were literally on the ground laughing by that point. To his immense credit, he never once broke a smile, laughed, or repeated an insult during the entire hour or so that this was going on. Funniest thing I have ever seen in my life. My RDC, Navy boot camp instructor, ripped butt all the time. It got to the point where she would always do it at the most quiet time just to beat us later for laughing. My favorite moment was when we were lining up for chow and she walks by and toots so hard the entire line heard it. 80 plus people, and as she hears people giggling, she whips around and screams, "WHO the frick said that." All the grins were wiped immediately only to hear her follow up, "Some buttholes talking crap behind my back." Another time a guy ripped butt during a mock inspection, so the same RDC told him to bend over and recruit vacuum that mother, taking in deep breaths. Someone in my flight farted and we had to filter it before the fart got to the TI. So you could imagine 40 of us breathing super heavy so this fart didn't reach the TI. Good times. My drill sergeant didn't say it but I did. It was the end of the day and I was cleaning up in my wall locker. I hear Yost slowly turning around. I say, "What's up?" It was my DS, and not a battle buddy, although they were around. My eyes got big like, oh crap, what did I just say? He says, "What the frick did you just say?" So I was like, "What's up, drill sergeant?" He almost lost his bearings and busted up laughing. It was the most awkward thing I saw on someone's face. He was trying to yell and laugh at the same time. Later after graduation he came up to me and couldn't stop laughing about the incident. I had a guy say okay to my RDC, so she had him stuff his head inside a locker in the front of the compartment and had him yell okay. She walked all the way to the back and would yell at him, "I can't hear you." 2 minutes later another guy did the same thing, so she put his head in a locker across from the first guy and they said okay and okay back for a good 5 minutes. Drill smoked the heck out of a Hispanic private almost every day named Lemon because he wouldn't accept that his new name was now Private Lemon. "Say your name is Lemon." Doing push-ups, "It's Lemon." Drill sergeant, "Lemon, goddammit, say IT." Girl had bad form, but too high, when we were all in the front leaning rest position doing push-ups. Drill, "What are you doing, private? You're supposed to be doing push-ups, not trying to get fricked." It was actually said by a female drill SGT, who I'm pretty sure was removed shortly after. That doesn't even seem that bad for DS insults. You all remember when I told you to drill like you've got someone you care about watching you out there? Well, if you don't have anybody, do it for that groundhog. He's got his eye on you. There was literally a freaking groundhog taking a crap 10 feet away from the formation. Funniest crap ever. This was in USMC Officer Candidate School in Quantico, VA back in the 1980s. We were all Marine Option Naval ROTC Scholarship midshipmen. We were shining our boots when a staff sergeant, called a sergeant instructor, from another platoon walked through. Delbert, a friend of mine, glanced up from his work and made a microsecond of eye contact with the sergeant instructor. SI, midshipman, "Why are you looking at me?" Delbert, "Silence." SI, midshipman, "Do you like me?" At this point I am listening and thinking, crap, I'm not sure there is a good answer to that question. Delbert. Yes. Sergeant Instructor. SI. Well, liking leads to loving and loving leads to fricking. Do you want to frick me, midshipman? Delbert. No. Sergeant Instructor. SI. Then keep your damned eyeballs off of me. I enlisted in 1993, 3 days after graduation from HS. I was 11B, an infantryman. I ended up going to basic training at Fort Benning. In the unbearable Georgia heat, our senior drill sergeant was RSFC Morales. He was 6 feet 6 inches, skinny as heck, wore some 70s style aviator glasses, had these old indecipherable tattoos up and down both arms, Hispanic, was missing a bunch of teeth, had a voice like gravel, a laugh like glass breaking, and a Boston accent. He loved fricking with us. He never addressed us men, or soldiers. We were always referred to as homos, or wussies or B, oftentimes a combination of two or all three. What do you want? Wussy B. In the army we have this ambiguous word, hua. I always pronounced it as hua. It can mean pretty much anything, but DS Morales would mostly use it at the end of a question to confirm our acknowledgement. The exchange between DS Morales and a trainee would go something like this. DS Morales. Alright homo. You will engage the 50-meter target until I tell you to cease fire. Hua? Me. Hua. Drill Sergeant. DS Morales. With Boston accent, you calling me a hua? W. Me. He did that constantly. Another time, we, the trainees, were sitting in a semicircle getting some instructions read to us from a manual by DS Morales while another drill was demonstrating the actions being read. After a few moments, the one doing the demonstration walked up to DS Morales and told him he was reading it wrong and tried to snatch the manual out of his hands. DS Morales threw the manual on the ground, did a knife hand to the other and said, "I'm fricking this chicken. You're just holding the wings." We sat there in stunned silence trying to interpret yet another army euphemism while the drill sergeant that got knife-handed went back to his place in the demonstration circle. I was amazed at how territorial army drill sergeants were when it came to their recruits. I saw my drill sergeants almost come to blows with other drill sergeants because those others corrected us on something. Then I went to Navy boot camp and you were open game for all the company commanders and their shenanigans. It was the middle of the night and we were awake and sneakily writing letters to our loved ones. Then, out of nowhere, our sergeant, our brother flight sergeant, and a random, older, Mexican man burst in the room and literally flipped the first bed, which has someone in it. I just remember hearing a loud boom and turning to see my buddy flying through the air in slow motion. The sergeants trashed everything, as you can imagine, while this Mexican guy stood in the corner the whole time. After destroying our rooms and lockers, they demanded it all be fixed and cleaned by the time they returned in the morning and the three of them left. As we cleaned, we all talked and questioned each other on who the Mexican guy was. Well, on our last day in basic, we asked our sergeant who he was. He immediately starts laughing and says that they were at the bar and started talking to this random guy. The three of them did a bunch of shots together and got really drunk and started talking about how the two of them were TIs. DIs. The guy mentioned how cool and funny it must be. They looked at each other, then they looked at him and said, "Wanna see?" So the three of them hopped in a cab, smashed in the room in the middle of the night, and wrecked everything worse than I think I saw the whole time I was in basic. All because they got drunk with a Mexican and thought it'd be funny. And here I thought they'd hired a day laborer to help them beat the crap out of you guys. I will murder you in front of a live studio audience. People fall down the stairs all of the time here. We don't look into it much. I would take you into combat, but I'm afraid you would shoot me in the butt. I actually just laughed out loud at the live studio audience one. That's genius. My TI spotted a hair on my chin and yelled that my face looked like his ballsack, and then made the rounds back to me and whispered that was a compliment. My ballsack looks fantastic, just loud enough for the guys in formation around me to hear. Nobody broke out in laughter, but the dude next to me had tears rolling down his face from keeping it all in. Oh my god, I think that's the funniest one I've read yet. I had a dream last night, Private S. Do you want to know what it was about? Not really, Drill Sergeant. I had a dream you were eating pudding, and I woke up with a spoon in my butt. What do you think about that, Private S? I proceeded to die from laughter. Well sir, what you do in your own time is your own business. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.